Welcome back to Fullcourt Passport. I'm Ric Bucher. That is Boston Boki Nakbar. And we got a lot to get into. I don't know if we're going to get it all in on this show, but that's the beauty of us doing this every week and the topics that we're covering because we are global and there's a lot to get to. But I'm going to start, Boki, by going back to the very beginning where you and I first crossed paths and the start of your NBA career with the first NBA game, playing for the Houston Rockets against the Indiana Pacers in Indiana. And I was there in my duties following both Boki Nakbar and Yao Ming, maybe a little more Yao Ming. And I'm curious what you remember, what your takeaway was from that game and that experience.
Yeah. Hey, Rick. Great to see you again. Man, long time ago. It feels like really long time ago. I mean, it is a long time ago, right? We're talking, I guess, October or early November, 2002.
The one thing
Right?
I did not put down is the date.
Yeah, but I don't remember if this
It would
season.
have been the first week in November at that time.
Okay, yeah, because that time the season started a little bit later. So, I mean, I to be honest, I thought about this game a lot as I was getting older, and then when I retired and all this, because it was kind of like it marks a special case, right? When you're like for the first time on an official NBA game,
Sure.
it's of course a dream for every young basketball player. And to me, that game, it happened so fast, and so many things happened at the same time that trying to absorb everything, I think that's why that whole game for me is like a blur.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember is that I did score. I started the game because Glenn Rice was out at the time. I do remember that. He was the
Okay.
starter. So until he recovered, I was basically the starting forward for the
Okay.
first couple of games of the season. And I know I scored, like, I think it was like early on, I scored like a bucket, like off the dribble bank shot or something like
Yep.
this. I remember that.
Okay.
I don't remember anything else. And I think we lost, if I'm not mistaken. So that's all I remember.
So I thought that was your second game that you started. I thought you were first off the bench in the
Maybe.
very first game.
I think I started. Because I played two games. The second one was in Denver, I think.
Yes, and you
Right?
won that game.
We won that game.
Yes.
So I think I started in both. I think I started in
Okay.
both. I'm telling you, it's like been like a blur, and I
Yes.
never really, I never saw the game again. I never like
Right.
rewatched it or
Right.
anything like this.
Really? You never went back and looked at
No.
it?
I don't. People who know me well know that I don't watch my games. So that's
Okay.
I'm really weird like that. Like I'll occasionally, if I run into something where somebody we're watching some game, I'll maybe check it out. But
Yeah.
I don't sit in front of the computer or TV and rewind my games and live in the past. So I don't do that.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I do remember that I scored a bucket. Those were my
Yes.
first points in the NBA,
Yep.
and it was huge. I mean, you know, we had such an exciting team with the Rockets. Like Steve Francis, Coutinho Mobley, like Yao was there, right? Like Mucci Norris, Calvin
Yep.
Cato, Mo Taylor. Like it was a young and up and coming team, and I often talk to some of my former teammates when I run into them, and I spoke with Steve Francis. I still keep in touch with him, probably more than anybody else over the years. And we always talk about that, like what would happen if that team stayed together for more years
Mm.
than just two, and then the trades start happening, and then T Mac came in and Steve left. So interesting time, but I don't remember much. You were there to specifically watch the game, so you probably remember much more than I do.
I do. I know that you outscored Yao. Yao had more. And I believe, see, I thought you came in I thought you were the first guy off the bench that game.
It's
Started the
possible.
next
It's
game.
possible. It is possible. Yeah, you might be
But
right.
you were right that Glenn Rice wasn't available, and you did score. Therefore, having two more points than Yao because he had more fouls than rebounds.
Yeah,
And you came, but this is what surprised me because this is what I had forgotten that he didn't start that game. Kelvin Cato
yeah,
did.
you're right.
And he came in off the bench after you
Hmm.
and was, I think he had two rebounds and no points and three fouls. And what I remember was I was thinking, oh, this going in to see him after the game. They lose.
Yeah.
He has a terrible game. What state of mind is he going to be in? Because I knew already, like, all of the pressure and focus on him from China and here.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in and he looked at me and he had like a smirk on his face and he goes, nowhere to go but up. and, and that's when I knew he was going to be okay. I was like, if he can shrug this off, he can still have a sense of humor after this being the number one pick. He's going to be okay. And by the way, congratulations on keeping in touch with Steve Francis, because he's been a hard guy to track over the last few years.
I don't know how Steve is with other people around him. I can't comment on that. But one thing I will say is that he took me under his wing from day one. I don't know why. I don't know how the connection is. A guy from played in Maryland and is basically this young sensation in the NBA, and then a guy from Slovenia who nobody knows about, and we kind of clicked, right? So he would stay after practice and play one-on-one with me, or when my brother visited, he would play one-on-one with my brother. He would bring in like a tailor to get me clothes done for me. Like he would leave his Sean John boxes and say, "Rook, that's all for you," and I would wear all baggy clothes and be all cool, right? Like I never asked for any of it, and he just did that, and that's why for me personally it was really a tough when he got traded and he left, because he was like the older brother on the team, and we did kind of lose track maybe between like when I left the NBA in 2008 and then until maybe 2015 or something. But lately we're kind of in touch, and it's easy to be in touch with social media and all these things. But we'll sometimes comment each other's Instagram posts or whatever. So it's good to see that he's still this. At least to me, he's still the same old Steve Francis.
So one of the first cover stories that I wrote for ESPN the magazine was about Steve Francis, and we got a photo of him with Destiny's Child, which
I remember
Beyonce
that.
Knowles, right?
I remember that.
Right?
And
and that was like a big thing. And to this day, Tim Frank, who's now in the front office, he was the media relations guy for the Rockets at the time. I will always have a place in his heart because he was with the Rockets, and I got him Beyonce Knowles and Stevie Francis on the cover of ESPN the magazine, and I did that story. And so I've always had a connection with Steve too, and I think the world of him. I think he's just one of the most genuine, big-hearted human beings. But he's like a human satellite in my life. I've reached out to him a number of times and not heard back. And then I ran into him at the All-Star game in Toronto, just happenstance, ran into each other. And then a year or two ago, we ran into each other again at John Lucas's charity golf tournament. And Steve wasn't playing, but he was in a golf cart, and he just like, I saw him and we saw each other, and then he went driving off he had no idea where he was going. I don't know that anybody saw him again. He just took off in a golf cart and was gone. And that's just kind of Steve. And so, I wish, I jealously, like, I like him so much that I wish I had better connection with him or were able to stay in better touch with him. So if you do talk to him, tell him that I said hello.
I definitely will. And it, with him was like, I think it was the first time that I realized the harsh reality of the NBA. One day you're here and then next day you're traded. It was off season, but still, like when I found out, I was actually in Houston working like summer workouts and things like that when the trade happened. And I know how much it hurt him. Like it was. I think I might be an overstatement, but I will say it like this: I don't think he ever recovered from that. Honestly, like as an athlete, right?
Yeah.
Because he always felt like Houston was his team, was his city. Like Rockets were like he identified with it. He super appreciated because he was supposed to be in Vancouver and then ended up in Houston, and like Yao was there and his boy Coutinho and I think that really, really like mentally hurt him when he got traded. I think it was a big hit for him. So So yeah, I mean, but only good. Otherwise, only good memories, and can't wait to run into him at some point soon.
For sure. So, one of the reasons I brought up that first game for you is because I'm really curious about what the transition was like for you going from the international game to the NBA at that time, uh, and how much of an adjustment it was, particularly when you look at the way the game is played now versus then.
Mm-hmm.
And but let's start with just how different was the NBA game at that time from what you had been used to?
I only played in that time. I'm not playing the game in the NBA now. I see it, so it's still different to feel something than to see something. But I do think I don't think I'm making any huge announcement. Like the game is a lot different.
Hmm.
It is a lot different. The amount of physicality back then, and especially the amount of ISOs you would see and situations that they would put you in, and if you couldn't defend, you couldn't stay on the court,
Mhm.
and all that stuff was incredible. Like because Rick, like everybody played on the post. Like the post game was like the game. Like
Yep.
that's where basically games were won and games were decided. And even some point guards would like back players down and
Sure.
play back to the basket, and then if the double team came, they would kick the ball out, and so on and so on. So when I was in these situations, like it was tough, to be honest. Like that was probably for me the biggest adjustment. Like defense after defense, having to guard guys that would post me up on my position and take advantage of the fact that I wasn't as strong or wasn't as quick with my
Mhm.
feet until I adapted my body to that style of game. So
Right.
much different than what we see now, where it's like an up tempo, up and down game, a lot of pick and roll, a lot of penetration, a lot of kickouts, threes, right? Like back then, there were not so many threes being shot as now. So definitely, when I watch NBA now, I see a lot of difference from that time.
By the end of your time in the NBA, had it started to shift toward, because they started blowing the whistle a lot.
Hmm.
They started, and freedom of movement and all of that became an emphasis.
Hmm.
And it took them a while to kind of get to where it is now, or where it was. I think they're going back to more of a physical style where it was, say, 5, 6 years ago, or maybe even longer than that. I think, but there was, I just remember where now suddenly it was like if there was any contact whatsoever, there was a whistle being blown, and it became much more conducive to offense and free flow. Did you experience any of that before you went back overseas?
A little bit. I think if I compare though that 6 year span that I was there from 2002 and then 2008 at the end, I could see it, but I saw more shift in tactical part in the NBA than anything, because you started to see those teams playing small ball more. We actually played it with the Nets, right? We would have the five players on the court, not starters, but for the majority of the game, especially down the stretch, was basically Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, Richard Jefferson, myself, and then the five, which would be Mikey Moore or Nenad Kirstic or Twin Collins, right? So,
Yep.
um, and other teams did the same. So we were not the only ones. I mean, Phoenix probably started it, and then everybody kind of followed that suit, but you could see that switch, and with that I think the game became quicker, it became more open, the threes started to became more important, more emphasis, and I think all that then led also to some rule changes that allowed for the game to be
Yeah.
much quicker and much different.
Yeah. How much do you think that shift benefited international players? Because as we've seen the game evolve, we've also seen the rise in the status of international and the value of international players come along, whether it's Manu Ginobili or Dirk, or like there was a time where, Vlade Divac was a legendary, unless I'm wrong, like sort of a legendary player coming overseas, and yet he was looked at as almost not a backup, but certainly he was a role player. You didn't have
Mhm.
international players that were considered part of the nucleus of teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I think second part of the '90s probably started to change that a little bit, where you saw. I mean, first it was Dražen, right? Dražen Petrovic, who
Yeah.
became, the main guy with the Nets, right? So that was maybe the first, and then you saw kind of Tony Kukoc, especially the year that Michael was out, and he
Yep.
took a bigger role, and he became the next, and then Dirk, right? Dirk was, and Steve Nash, obviously. So I think those were like the guys that at least I remember that were changing that narrative of international players only being role players, and then others follow, right? Pau and Tony and Peja and those guys becoming then all stars, and I think then it slowly changed into what it is today. I mean, it's a
Yep.
20-year gap, but still, right? Like somewhere it had to start. But yeah, I still think that, at least in my time in the NBA, like majority of players, if you became a role player or if you were a rotation player, like it was already a lot. I think that, obviously wanted to have best careers possible we could, but for a lot of us who were not stars in our teams, to be in rotation and to have an impact on games, especially in the playoffs, was huge already. I think that if that was achieved, you already kind of like made it, and you put like a check mark next to your
Yeah.
career. Like I succeeded, right? Like what else can you ask for? And it is true, because so many international players still today never get that chance. I mean, some
Yep.
of them are because of the injury, because of not a right fit, but some of them are just simply not good enough. Like it's, but to have a chance to play and to play on a winning team, it's huge.
How much did you see it shift? Because the hallmark for me was there was always, when I first started covering the league in the 90s, the foreigners and the foreign culture that was over there. And then I think the big shift was when I saw guys like Kevin Garnett become soccer fans
Hmm.
and embrace soccer. And then we're embracing European international fashion, like guys dressing and it wasn't all.
It's so funny you mentioned that. It's so funny you mentioned that, because I played two years in Italy before I got drafted. So I go to draft in the, what's the brand called, Walter Zegna or whatever it is, like Italian brand
Xenia,
suit,
yeah.
right? Zegna, right? Like
Yep.
I had like a, for that time, tight
Oh, that was
suit.
top of the line.
But it was tight. Like all
Oh,
the
yeah,
guys
yeah,
had the
yeah,
tight clothes. I
yeah.
remember when I came to Houston, all the guys were making fun, saying like, "What are you wearing this tight suit for?" Right? And then only Catino Mobley, he was the only one that started wearing like tight clothes, and he's like, "Yeah, I can see that Italian style." Like it was rare,
Yep.
but it started slowly then to catch up, right? But it wasn't so odd if you had, tighter wear or more
Yep.
fashionable wear. So I do see. I think that world probably was becoming smaller for other reasons, not just obviously sports or basketball, but fashion or more connected with the internet and all that stuff. Because
Hmm.
that was the time that the world was changing. If you think about it, right? Like in the '90s, YouTube, internet didn't exist, right?
Yep.
2000s, it's when it started, and I think that shift, that internet shift, also has something to do with most likely NBA and other sports becoming more international than they were.
Yeah. Well, and that's why again, I see the value of this podcast, but the not to dive too deep into politics, but in the US, this nationalism and this trying to separate ourselves from the rest of
Mm.
from the rest of the world, I'm like, it's too late. Like,
Yeah,
we're more interconnected than we ever have
true,
been.
true.
We're not going back the other direction.
Yeah,
That's not happening.
yeah.
Could you have ever imagined at that time that you would have four international players at the top of the MVP ballot? And it's been a couple of years now where, quietly Americans are like, hey, when are, what, this is supposed to be our game.
I mean,
and
uh,
and the best players in the NBA, or at least the guys that are vying for MVP, are not Americans, and I don't see one other than maybe Anthony Edwards on the
mhm.
horizon.
I think, first of all, I think it has to do a lot with game becoming more international, and the style of play is different than what it was. It definitely suits international players more than it did in the past. But to imagine 4 consecutive MVPs, absolutely, like international players. If I would say yes, if I would lie, like back then, of course, we didn't think that that's, let's say, I wouldn't say not possible, but very difficult to achieve. Nobody thought about that, right? It's not like international players all focused and said, "Hey, let's get one of us becoming the MVP." Like when Dirk got it, like he got it, right? So,
Right.
but that was, everybody saw this as a one-off, right? We
Mm.
didn't think that it would come to a situation where 15 years later or whatever, you would have like 4 consecutive, and now, like you said, that trend might continue for some time. Um, so I think it tells a lot, to be honest. But I wouldn't just base it off of MVP MVPs or MVP candidates. I think you have to look at it broader. Like, I don't know the exact number of international players this year in the NBA, but I know
Oh,
it's been
I think
growing.
it's over 30%,
Right,
like 35%.
right. So I mean, it's been growing, and it's probably going to continue to grow as the game becomes even more international. So that's not a surprise to me that out of these players, you can get so many quality players for all the reasons we mentioned over the last 10 minutes or whatever, like
Yeah.
including the game being different than what it was. And the game now more open, more team play, faster. I think it suits international players better than what it was 20, 25 years ago when it was slower and more physical and more one-on-one, low block kind of dominant.
I would also make the case that because of the way players are brought up overseas in terms of the focus on fundamentals and having a complete game and being able to play in a variety of ways. And I would say one of the big things is being able to play a floor bound game. It's not,
Mhm.
it may be more open, but it's not pure athleticism. And I look at the international players that are having the most success, the Jokic's and the Doncic's.
Yeah,
They're beating you with their mind. They're
yeah,
beating you with their footwork. They're
yeah,
beating you by almost turning the athleticism of American players against them
yeah,
because they're constantly trying to impose that athletic ability, and and they have them moving in multiple directions. I feel like that is in part that's what's been lost in the way that America has been developing talent over the 10-15 years. We have become enamored with the athleticism and the incredible athleticism, the vertical
hmm
and all of that, but we've lost sight of, the underpinning of the game is still the basic fundamentals and footwork and being able to play on the floor.
yeah. And I think one other comparison that we can make is when USA team plays international basketball. Like they're always a favorite to win, and they win a lot, but those are tough games. If you think about Serbia, France, now lately Germany, Turkey has amazing talent coming up, and obviously more and more countries. So, and one thing that you see is this style of play that you're mentioning is the tactical part. European basketball has always historically been a very tactical game. We
Mhm.
have, over the last decades or so, not just recently, but even in the 80s or even before, some of the coaching, some of the masterminds, they were never in the aim. Those coaches never came over, never were an NBA, never were around the NBA, but they were some of the most amazing coaches when it came to X's and O's and how to prepare young players to play such game, because you really had to understand the switches, different kind of defensive alignments,
Mhm.
trick plays, and so on and so on, because you would have guys that are maybe not the most athletic, so you had to come up with other ideas on how to beat opponents.
Right.
It wasn't just about being faster and quicker and jumping
Right.
more. It was also about finding the plays to beat the opponent. I think that's the European culture of basketball, especially back in the 80s, 90s. It was like the old Yugoslavian style of play, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. That's why you saw a lot of players in that late in the 90s and early 2000s from that area who played in the NBA and very successfully, because they had that kind of an upbringing,
Yeah.
together with obviously technically being very sound and developed a really good shot. Again, because the physicality wasn't there and the speed wasn't there, but you had to think on how you're going to beat opponent, not just being faster. And you're right. I think that what we're seeing now in the NBA is probably a mix of everything. Game is super fast, it's athletic, but it's bringing in that different kind of thinking and different kind of X's and O's that we haven't seen in the past.
Yeah.
More ball movement and more body movement.
This is where it's going to be difficult for the U.S. to turn the tide on where it's going. Is that I look at whether it's France or even Canada, obviously in Serbia. Each one of these countries has a system in the way that it teaches basketball. There's a certain conformity or mindset in terms of how you teach the game and how it's played. And so you have all these systems, and what I've seen is a lot of these countries have, like France as an example, like they're going to some of their colonies, they're finding the athletic talent in other places and then bringing it to France and putting it into their programs and cultivating it. And so they're getting the best of both worlds. They're getting the athleticism and the fundamentals. And the United States, as big as it is, and we've always thought, like, look at all the people that we have and the games played all over, and just by mass numbers, we should have more talent. And we do physically, but we don't have a collective system in terms of how we teach the game. And that was the real game changer for Canada, is that they came up with a way to credential coaches having to go through a program of how we're going to teach the game. Even simply like, which pivot foot are we using? We're going to be consistent on both sides of the floor. Little things like that became universal. And that's where I see, I don't know that it's going to shift anytime soon in terms of the U.S. being able to harness the great athletic talent that this country produces.
Yeah, it'll probably have to be a shift in mentality, and especially, and I'm not just talking about the highest level of professional sports, but also with the younger players. With coaches who are working with young players, like start changing the way game is coached and the way game is seen. More passes, more ball movement, more movement without the ball, not just focusing on who has the ball and let the one guy create 1 against 5, which I occasionally still see a lot when I check out, high school tapes or AAU tapes and so on and so on. You don't see that. If you compare that to the club basketball in Europe, occasionally you'll see it. Sure, I mean, there's talented players who have more right on the court to do it, but in general, it's not that. If you go to any serious tournament in Europe for under 16, under 18, under 20, you will not see that kind of basketball. It's going to be body movement. It's going to be ball movement. That's what it's based on.
So this kind of leads me into the next topic, which is comments made by a legendary Serbian coach, Željko Obradović. I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are.
And he was asked about the idea of the NBA starting a rival league in Europe, and he was not a fan of it. Now, Ettore Messina is a little more open-minded. I think he was asked sort of the same question. And this kind of feeds into what we're just talking about, where I appreciate Željko's reluctance here, because there is something pure about, and there's a lot of elements about EuroLeague basketball that I really appreciate that are not NBA. And I would hate to lose that.
Yeah.
I can also see where there are advantages to that place. And you, as the director of the Players Union, I mean, this is kind of a hot topic subject for you. So I will understand if you tread carefully.
I will tread carefully, but I will say this, like, we all of us, we live European club basketball through EuroLeague, right? I mean, it's impossible to disregard that, to say that EuroLeague does not exist if you're a European basketball fan. It's been here for 25 years. It's produced some amazing seasons, amazing players, amazing plays, amazing championships. And with that, the amount of fans and the passion and the history behind these clubs that these fans follow and support and generate, it's incredible, right? It's absolutely incredible. From the and I'm going to say this very carefully, from the player side, I almost wish fans would follow players more, but I understand it. Fans follow clubs in European basketball
Yeah.
more than anything else.
Yeah.
Olympiacos fan is going to stay Olympiacos fan for life, no matter where players move. Partizan fan is going to stay Partizan fan. Barca fan is going to stay Barca fan. It's different.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about NBA Europe and all the potential changes that will happen in European basketball landscape, which nobody knows when or how exactly at this point, I only hope that part gets preserved.
Yeah.
That's my whole thing. Like, we cannot lose what makes European basketball, which is the history, the passion of the fans, the love for the game. Because if you ever go to a EuroLeague game or any other, I would say, good league in Europe that has fan following, you will feel that. It is different than it is when in the NBA. And me, as a former NBA and EuroLeague player, and people always ask me where I enjoyed it most, and I always enjoy my time in the NBA most because it was my dream to play in the NBA, and I lived it. I also enjoyed a lot EuroLeague and all that, but the passion you see here is not comparable to the NBA when it comes to fans and the culture and the history behind it, and how passionate these fans are when it comes to supporting their club.
Yeah.
And in all these changes, the only thing I don't want to see is that we lose that, because we can't. That's the core of European basketball.
I'm with you. And having seen what the NBA does, the NBA is so good from a business standpoint. They really know how to monetize the game. But as a result of that, the game suffers. The game's, the purity of the game hasn't always been first and foremost. And if you love the game of basketball and you love that chemistry and the beauty of it, then it's difficult to see that happen, even though it becomes more popular. And I've seen that in a number of different ways. The Golden State Warriors, like, their fans were so passionate in Oakland, and they didn't necessarily win all the time, but they played a very exciting brand of basketball, and people felt special because they supported them when they weren't good. And they would go and they'd be down by 20 and they'd make a run and get within 3 and then still lose by 15. And people just loved that they came close,
Yeah.
and you were part of a family in going to those games and supporting the team in the Bay Area that not everybody supported. And then in the move to San Francisco, they lost some of that culture, that gritty Oakland culture. And with the Las Vegas Summer League, I was invited by Warren Legary, the agent who was part of first fashioning the idea of a summer league in Vegas. And I think there was like 5 teams. And he begged for me to come out. I was with ESPN at the time, and I went out, and it was just in the one Cox Pavilion. And I think at least 1 or 2 of the teams were formed by agents. Like, they had they had their clients making up a team. They just wanted them to be seen.
Yeah.
And I saw it evolve from that to now, where they're filling the Thomas and Mack Arena to the rafters.
It's the biggest summer basketball event. Period.
It's crazy. I mean, but again, something has been lost in terms of the intimacy and what Summer League was for me, where it was like the family of the NBA, of basketball people, came together. And you didn't have to worry about security or I got a credential. Like, I could sit down and talk to somebody, and I still can, but it's more challenging. You've got to go through like a security person looking at your credential to see if you're allowed in this section to go sit with whoever. That just didn't exist before. And fans could do it too. Like, you were all kind of there. And so that is where, with Abramovich and his concern, I don't know if it's we share why, but I've seen the NBA make something big and successful financially, but it's at a cost of something that I see in EuroLeague. Um, and it reminds, that's why I think a couple of shows ago I said EuroLeague right now reminds me of when I first started covering the NBA. And it's because the NBA at that time, I'll never forget, I was invited to I was covering a Warriors game. I was a beat writer. I was in New York, and they invited me into the offices, and they took me around, and I met everybody. And the NBA like went, what stories are you going to do? They wanted me to connect me with players and with teams and give me access in order to be able to tell stories. And I love, that's what I love the NBA. You know, the NFL was already holding people at arm's length, but Major League Baseball, like those guys, the players didn't have any use for reporters or whatever. The NBA was like, come in, share this with us, right? Tell our story. And I love that. And that's the EuroLeague still has the opportunity to do that. They're not doing it, but they have the opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yes. The question is whether EuroLeague can do that by itself or they need a helper. I don't know how to say it otherwise. That's why my big my big desire is that somehow NBA or NBA Europe and EuroLeague can find way to cooperate and create something even greater than it is now.
Hmm.
Not two separate leagues, because I think that's going to be devastating to European basketball in general. I don't think that's good.
Yep.
I don't know how fragmenting already fragmented European basketball landscape helps. Maybe I'm wrong, but ideally I would love to see these two strong leagues or come together. On one hand, the passion, the love for the game, the European style in EuroLeague, and then the know-how and the business that NBA brings
Yeah.
when it comes to all the media rights and commercializing the league better and bringing it closer to fans and all that stuff. If you look at it from like a purely outside perspective, like it's a win-win situation if you can have mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's doable or not, I guess we'll see in some years.
Well, this is what I know about the NBA is that if they get involved and it's a success, they're going to take it over. Like
Yeah.
Warren Legary is allowed to still be at Las Vegas Summer League, but he doesn't really run the show by any stretch anymore. And that's where I feel as if EuroLeague would be prudent in taking the reins and shaping that business end from their perspective. Like make those moves, make those changes, get people that are going to be willing to tell the EuroLeague story and make it bigger and provide that media attention and access, right? But do it on the EuroLeague team's terms so that that culture and that history and that intimacy is retained and protected as you go about doing that. And I do believe there is a way to do both, right?
I also believe it is. The thing that I'm afraid of is the whether it's NBA Europe by itself or NBA and EuroLeague together, creating something new and not having some of those teams who are bringing so much to EuroLeague today part of that new league. Having them in a lower the league trying to qualify, because I'm afraid of some of these clubs potentially like falling off, because in Europe we've seen clubs disappear in the past.
Mm-hmm.
European basketball is heavily dependent in most cases on owners who are basically putting money on the table and losing money to support clubs and communities and all that. Like if you lose some of that, if they don't see the incentive anymore of competing against the best, they might turn the other way. I don't want to see teams who have been great in EuroLeague fall off and not ever recover from that change. That's what I'm afraid of. Like,
Yeah.
and hopefully that doesn't happen. So, again, I agree with you. I think there is a work to way together. I mean, we're obviously speaking from outside, let's say, but the ideal scenario is for the two competitions, or for the two businesses, if you want to call it like this, to work hand in hand and find a way to create something bigger than it is now.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, as I see it, it following the model of the European Union, where the euro was created in order to, sort of find a way to create a collective interest so that you don't have all of these independent bodies fighting for themselves, because EuroLeague is so unique in that you do have all these countries. It's finding some common bond where everybody says, in the best collective interest, this is what we're going to do, that raises the bottom, doesn't take away from the top to be able to rise, but that you have a certain baseline that protects everyone.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. And I'm unique in this because, or I have a unique perspective because I do a lot of media training with teams, and have over the years with athletes and front offices. I did one NBA team from top to bottom, from owner to the players, in terms of, hey, if you guys all need to be on the same page, and you have to understand how it's a benefit to you to interact with the media.
How important is that? In your opinion, how important? Not just how, I know it's very important, but why? And why is that a game changer for players, coaches, front office to be on the same page and to understand the big picture, where the team is, where they want to go, and to translate that message to their fan base and wider?
Well, number one, if you're trying to, like, there's sort of a perspective, a cynical perspective, that we want to keep the media at arm's length. We don't want to let them in, because if they get some of our business, then they're going to report on our business. And if there's any disagreement or whatever there is within our franchise, then that's going to make us look bad and whatnot. So it's better that we just keep the door shut. And by doing that, you're not allowing the media to tell your story and to broadcast who and what you're doing, and cultivating the relationship with your fans. And we're never going to get away, as much as people like to vilify the media today, that's become popular. The reality is, when you have a third party presenting who you are and how you operate and what you're all about, it has more authenticity than when you're speaking for yourself. When a team is advertising for itself, there's always going to be, well, of course they're going to say all the good things, and they're going to say they're this and that. It doesn't have the same integrity as someone who's outside of that sphere saying, you know what, these guys are about the right thing, even when they're not winning. See, that's the big thing, is being able to entertain and tell a story and get fans to believe, when it's not just you're not winning championships. There's a way to sell hope and belief and give entertainment, and that's what the media is capable of doing. In order to do that and not look fractured, that's where internally you have to make sure everybody understands this is what we're about, and be able to address any differences before you go out there and meet the public.
But in this might be a little bit of a, maybe not, but maybe a provocative question. Like, in your career, did you experience that there was ever a filter between a team and yourself and players of that team, meaning that you had to have your story or your reporting checked by the team before it was released? Does that even exist in the media in the States, where a team would want to have a full control over what's being distributed to the public. We see that in Europe, and that's, I
Yeah.
think, still Europe is still far behind on that. It's too much controlling, and oftentimes the byproduct is that fans don't have direct access through media to the players.
Yep.
They don't know their personalities. They don't know how they react. They don't know
Yep.
how they are as humans, because there's a filter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, some NBA teams have gone that direction where they create their own content. They have their own reporters. But those reporters are only going to report on the good stuff. Like and the good stuff, I just mean like it's all happy.
Yeah.
They're not going to address any of the issues. And this is where, when I first started covering the league, it was the Golden State Warriors and Don Nelson, and we were allowed to come in and watch practice at times. Sometimes we could see the entire practice. And, sometimes something would happen. Guys, somebody throw an elbow, guys would square off, like you'd have things that would happen. And the understanding was, like, unless it's affecting the overall team, those things are going to happen. I'm not going to write about it, because if I write about it, it's going to make it something bigger than it actually is. Now, one of the problems today is, like, largely because there's not that relationship anymore, then anything that comes out that is the least bit titillating or could go viral is being thrown out there. And there's no unspoken, unwritten rules about what the relationship is going to be between the two sides. And so that is, I think that is that's something that is missing. And that is something that there's no reason that it couldn't be reestablished. I mean, the problem, again, is you mentioned social media. That creates part of the problem. Like there's just so many people looking just to make a splash or get attention.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big problem in Europe as well. Like, I think that the news, especially towards the end of season or the summer, about signings, like I don't want to put a percentage on it, but I'll do it anyways.
Yeah.
Probably 80-90% of those reportings are just rumors. Like and it's for us who are in this business, and we try to make the basketball here more professional. It's such a nightmare to deal with all that stuff. And then we get texts from players and saying, hey, what is this journalist talking about? Like, I don't know nothing, and it's putting a bad shadow on my name or something. It's just, that's an issue. And how much you think of that is also happening in the NBA, where there's just rumors are taking over, and there's no real there's no truth behind it to back it up.
It's gotten really bad with the NBA because there are a handful of reporters with very big platforms or working for the biggest networks. It has become transactional. If you give me the story, I'll write it the way you want me to write it. Whether that's coming from an agent or it's coming from a GM. And so you're getting a distorted perspective. It may be accurate, but it's slanted. And to me, that we've sort of given away our autonomy, where I always looked at it as I'm going to get both sides. I'm going to try to tell the truth of this situation. And I want you to trust that if I tell your side of the story, like, people may disagree with the decision or they made whatever it might be, but there's logic behind why a GM did this. There's a logic why a player did this, why a coach did this. And it's my job to explain that, not to pass judgment, just to explain it. And you can agree with it or disagree with it, but it's going to be what happened. And we can all agree that sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we look like the hero. Sometimes we don't. But we're all trying to do logical things and trust the truth and the relationship. And that seems like a quaint notion, right?
But so you do think it's gotten worse? in that
Oh,
sense. Yeah.
with
Over
without
the last 20, 30 years or whatever,
without
since you've been,
question.
yeah.
But I feel as if the NBA has done it, and the NBA teams have done it to themselves.
Hmm.
There was, and I will go back to like Mark Cuban when he came in. I saw this happen with the referees. You know, they would talk about referees managing the game, and they would talk about referees talking to players during the course of the game, not blowing their whistle, but like letting, hey, that's too much. You know,
Hmm.
they would have,
Hmm.
like, they would let them know. They would, Mark Cuban lost his mind. The referees are managing the game. Like, he thought that they were controlling it. And he was like,
Hmm.
no, they're trying to create a level playing field by communicating with the players and letting them know how the game is being called. That's managing it. Rather than just the black and white, I'm blowing the whistle when I see a penalty or whatever. And then Mark introduced the whole idea of keeping statistics and analytics. Like, this referee's not doing his job because he hasn't called a 3 seconds in two and a
Yeah,
half
yeah,
quarters or whatever it is.
yeah.
And it took the humanity out of the game and the innate understanding of how it works, right? Because at the heart of it all, at the heart of all of this, are the relationships. Boki, you're from Slovenia. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, living in California. We crossed paths in Houston, right?
Yep.
I don't know that we, as far as our backgrounds are concerned and where we came to basketball from, that we have a whole lot in common.
Well, we do have both. Both have our last names are German.
There you go. There you go. Well, and you know what? And that's part of it. It's like finding the commonality rather than
Yeah,
the
yeah,
differences, right?
yeah. But I get your
But,
point. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
but we have an understanding about certain things that allows us to create a perspective that we can both agree on,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And to me, that's like, if whether it's the NBA or EuroLeague or whoever it is, if we start there, like, we can find our way to a place where everybody's happy and successful.
I like
But it,
that.
it
Yeah,
becomes too much of the technical, like the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
numbers and the stats and all of that.
yeah.
So, um, wow, we we didn't get
We
to a
went
whole
deep.
lot. You know what? We promised that we were always going to have a game of the week, and we did
Yes,
have a game of the week. So we
yes.
have 6 or 7 minutes left. I do want to touch on the game of the week that you selected, Red Star versus Real Madrid, in Belgrad. And first of all, why? I think I know why you picked this game, but why did you pick this game as our game of the week?
Yeah, I don't want to do no disservice to any other games. Maybe me being in a position as a managing director of players union, saying, this game is better than the other. But since we're choosing one, I said, hey, I'll go with this one, and I'm going
Yeah.
to try to do pick best games for various reasons every week. And the reason why I picked this game this week was, I mean, first of all, on one side you have Real Madrid. It's a team as talented as you can get in EuroLeague. Obviously, multiple times champion, experience. Have a great coach in Coach Cariolo, great talented players. Every year have aspirations to win the league. But the even bigger reason is on the other side. Red Star Belgrade started the season 0-2.
And fired their coach.
Fire the coach. That's the reality of
Yeah.
European basketball is
Wild.
short fuse, right? Even though some people say, well, some things dragged on from last season and so on and so on. It doesn't matter. They gave the coach the opportunity to start the season, and it didn't work out.
Hmm.
They also lost some games in the ABA league or domestic league, and I think a game that they were supposed to win, and it led to coaches firing, right? So then you have a new coach coming in, Coach Sasha Obradovic, same last name as the coach in
No
Partizan,
relation.
no relation, but a former player of Red Star and has long history with the club, and is really one of those guys that is passionate about coaching somewhere where it means so much to him and to the people there. And they picked it up. They started playing really, really good basketball, and
Hmm.
now are won 3 games in a row before the tonight's game against Real Madrid. And that's why there was such a big hype about it, because they won 2 games in a row. They were playing at home. This big basketball club, Real Madrid, comes to play in your court. And I was really interested to watch whether they're going to withstand the pressure of now winning 2 games, and now we're past the losses and everything, or they're going to be able to or if they're going to be able to continue.
Yeah.
And they did. They started slow. Madrid took control early on, played some zone, which was interesting. You don't see a lot of zone in European basketball
And it was
anymore.
a 3-2 zone too.
Yeah,
which you generally don't. You don't see 2 guys on the back line.
You don't. So, and it worked for a while. It worked, but then towards the half, Red Star, picked it up a little bit, and then second half started great, went up 10, 13 points, and was able to hold the lead. And even though at the end, I think it was like a 15-point difference. I think the game
75, I think.
I think the game still delivered. Like, it had all these different kinds of elements of European basketball, very physical. We saw some zone. We saw the one team being up, then it changes, fans going crazy, and all of that. So great game. But I think that Red Star obviously picked it up. They're going to be a very dangerous team going forward. And my opinion is we haven't seen the real Real Madrid yet this season. I think they still have a lot of reserve. They're going to pick it up.
It was interesting. They played Real Madrid came out and played like 12 deep early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it, if I'm not mistaken, this was like their second game in the last 48 hours. They just played, right?
They played against Partizan in Madrid.
Yes.
Before that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I kind of understood that. I also thought in a lot of ways, I mean, there was a lot of high pick and roll. Their games and the way they played were very similar.
Mm-hmm.
What I was really curious about, and again, this is one of the cultural things that EuroLeague has that I would never want. Like, this is where it scares me with the NBA. The crowd organically chants and sings and gets behind the team and feels the momentum of the games and adds and fuels it. And you don't have like a Jumbotron where it's like, make noise or, like telling people what to cheer or whatever. Like, I never want to see that in EuroLeague. I mean, that's so refreshing, right?
Yeah, it's when you say the word naturally, it is true, even though it is orchestrated by a fan group usually that is
that's
basically,
fine.
But it's not, like you said, it's not a Jumbotron. It's not like, hey, let's tell fans
it's not some
defense.
wizard up in a booth.
No.
Right?
That's that's from the fans' perspective, fan support perspective. That's the huge difference, right? It comes naturally and comes from the heart, and it comes when it's needed the most, right? Like your home team is on a roll. They're picking up. They're about to tie the score or go up by a point. Like, fans feed off of that, and that's why I thought that that's why I wanted you to watch this game, to kind of relive that before, even though I know you've seen it, but it kind of showed what European basketball, club basketball is really about.
So this is my question from a player perspective. Real Madrid comes in and you could feel the momentum change. When you have a crowd that is putting that much energy into the game and is that loud, I mean, that has to be palpable. You have to feel that, right?
Yeah.
Is that part of the fatigue factor, in that you are not just revving up the home team to go hard, but you're kind of fighting that pressure coming the other way, and you may not be fully conscious of it during the course of the game, but I gotta feel like it has to be draining to be fighting against that.
It's so draining. It's so draining, but it is a double-edged sword, because if you go play on the road where the team is known for a crazy fan base, and you have a good game and you're able to react to that and you're able to shut those fans down, it feels amazing. It's the best feeling ever. To me, I prefer that over winning at home, because that feeling of shutting the fans down and winning on the road under those conditions is huge. So, but it is mentally draining going through that. almost 90 night out. Of course, some players feel it more, some feel it less, but it's not easy to win there. And I think tonight's game showed that. Like Madrid overall, very talented team, very experienced team, but they could not. They
couldn't sustain it.
win. No, they couldn't. They couldn't.
Yeah. All right. Well, as with every show that we've done, there is far more that we wanted to get to that we simply don't have time to, but we will. We will continue on in the next episode. Great seeing you again, Boki, and we will pick this up this time next week. To all of you out there, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.